Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now, the voice of college football's WVU pregame show. I am joined today by Frank Fear and our very special guest, Andy Peters, a great player at WVU back in the early 70s. We're excited to have him here with us and excited to talk about the Mountaineers. We had a week off to recharge our batteries a little bit, Frank, and now it's time to get this thing turned around and get rolling into the second half of the season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It really is. This is obviously a work in progress. We know that. And it looks like we may have a quarterback change today. Scotty Fox may start at quarterback. Just saw that not too many hours ago. And that's interesting. A dual threat quarterback, obviously, but a lot of responsibility for a freshman. And you think top two quarterbacks now, a redshirt freshman and a freshman. So it's always fascinating. And let me put in a plug too. It's so great to have Andy here. Yeah. And also let me put this up for those we've had Andy on the program before, and we encourage you to go to our website at YouTube, the Voice of College Football, West Virginia. There's a great video that we cut of Andy and his not only growing up in Pennsylvania, but also obviously his time at West Virginia, and then a great career, which is continuing. He'll talk about that in a few minutes, but just great to have you back with us again, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
It's always exciting to have these guys. Our show called the Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now. It's always to have these guys from then on the air with us. It brings back a lot of memories, and when you think about these guys that played. And, Frank, sometimes when you get as old as me and you, we forget, players as the years go on. And you're like, oh, man, I remember when he played, and it's so fun to go back in and pull up some YouTube. There's always YouTube video, even from Andy's time. There's always video to watch, and it's so much fun to do that. Andy, I know one of the things Frank and I talk about nearly every week is how impressed we are with the accomplishments of former Mountaineers. Once their tenure at WVU is up, what happens to them then? And we're going to, if you don't mind, take a few minutes here to let you just talk a little bit about, you can talk about your days at WVU and then go right on into the present. So I know that's a long span of history, but I know you can capitulate it and shrink it up a little bit.
Well, it's interesting. You go to WVU and you're there for 4 years. Back when we played, your scholarship really was 4 years. You didn't have the extended time that the players have, but how it really set me up for my life. And, you really don't understand at the time how much you're learning from people like Bobby Bowden and Chuck Clausine and Frank Signetti and from your teammates. And then you go out into life and you have all these things that are inside of you, and you start to bring them forward into your work life, and you start to pass up the other employees of the company because you've learned so much from these great people. And I've been very fortunate to be able to have a lot of success, and it took a lot of discipline and hard work. Everybody in their career, you don't start off at the top. You work your way up to it. And I worked really hard to get into the positions that I did, and working in the coal mines in Western Pennsylvania for about 11 years for the U.S. Steel Mining Company taught me a lot about labor and how to work with miners and how to succeed and what it took from a labor relations standpoint to be successful, and learn a lot about safety. That propelled me to a career at Dick Corporation in Pittsburgh, where I was the director of safety. And that led me to Maxim Crane, where I was the executive vice president of safety and risk management and human resources. And then moving out to California, working for Parsons. I'll never forget walking into the CEO's office, who happened to be from Wheeling, West Virginia. During the interview, wanted to just talk about football, and seeing the Rose Bowl in the background. That's how close the office was to the Rose Bowl. And then going on to AECOM, where we had 90,000 employees in 130 countries, and being the chief safety officer there. And then working for a big conglomerate out of Toronto, Canada, called Brookfield. And after that, I gave retirement a shot for about 16 months, but I found out that fish are smarter than they look, and golf's a lot harder than it looks, right? So I came back to work, and I'm the executive vice president for the Bragg Investment Company, which is a big crane rental firm, construction company, trucking company, and I'm out here in Huntington Beach, California. They need me, and I need them, and I'm really enjoying my time here, and it's going really well.
Wow, fantastic, unbelievable! And like we said earlier, Frank, these guys never fail to impress. It's always, we've heard some amazing stories, about careers after the fact, and this is no different.
Oh, that's right. And the thing is, what's great about this show is, better than anyone, is getting a chance to meet, get to know guys like Andy, and what you have is you've got the portrait of today. That's why we call this Then and Now. And then what I remember is that great second half in the Peach Bowl in 1975. Andy, you're on defense. That defense really came through. It was a great defense, but it really came through in that second half of the 75 Peach Bowl. And I can still see you bouncing around with your fellow defenders, and that coming from behind. And we had Danny Kendra on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned to you we had Tommy Bowden on the show last year, and Terry Bowden talked about it the other day. It's just what a great comeback that was, and that great pass to McDonald at the end where he scored the touchdown. It was what a day. And Tommy Pridemore from your hometown, Greg. God, talk about, I hate to use a baseball metaphor, but certainly the basis on that game.
And I think I've mentioned it, just about everybody that we've had on from that era and that game. I've mentioned this, and that my dad was sick with ALS. He'd just been diagnosed in 75 with ALS, passed away in 77. And the Pridemore family, his dad and my dad, of course, were friends. And they arranged tickets for him and took him down to Atlanta to the game. So he actually got to go and watch that Peach Bowl, last game he got to see. But I think that's why that game always stands out to me as one of the special ones. Of course, with Pridemore playing, we watched or listened every week just to see how he would do. But yeah, that game was a special one for me, and everybody that was involved. Obviously, special game for them, and it was a great game to watch. And I always think about that anytime we talk about that Peach Bowl game. So yeah, awesome. And like you said, bases loaded. that's quite an intro into that game. And wow. Andy, you're just what's your? I know again. We want to get onto our pregame, but what about your memories of that game? I know you got some fond memories of that.
Well, first of all, that was probably one of the best days of my life, winning that game. I had a lot of family there, grandmother, aunt, parents, brother, sister-in-law. I mean, it was fantastic. It was New Year's Eve, right? So that was the best New Year's Eve I ever had. When I think about that team, I think about the group of seniors that we had, both on offense and defense, and how we really hung together, through a rough season like the team's going through this year to a hugely successful season, which was kind of surprised everybody. When I think about that, we had some players that really peaked their senior year that really hadn't contributed much prior to that. I think Gary Lombard finally got a chance to start, right? Rich Lukowski finally got a chance to start, right? And those guys really shined. Ray Marshall, he probably played the game of his life. I remember him going out into flat in a screen pass and just, really smoking somebody on a third down to, stop one of their drives. I'm really good friends with Artie Owens, and I remember him making that catch right before halftime, right, which really, gave us some momentum going into half. It was just a surreal experience. I run into a lot of Clemson fans, and I tell them the story about how Frank Howard invited us down to practice there for 3 or 4 days to get out of the cold of Morgantown and use his facilities at Clemson University, and how that set us up for success. And, the pep talk he gave us, he wasn't a big fan of Lou Holtz, and he was a big fan of Bobby Bowden. He wanted us to beat North Carolina State so bad that before we got on the buses, he actually gave us a pep talk. Right? And, it was, and then, just all of the events associated with going to a bowl game, so I never forget being in the locker room and taking off my jersey for the last time and saying, darn, I wish I've had this experience earlier in my career, because I would have worked even harder as a player to get back to it, because what a great, outstanding experience it was to go to a bowl. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
the great,
I don't think, today people don't, there's not as much emphasis on these bowl games, but, back then that was huge. I mean, there weren't that many bowl games, and for a team to make a bowl like that was huge, especially West Virginia. That was a big deal, and then to actually win it when you're underdogs, that's even better. And but yeah, people don't I don't think realize, young people today, how significant that was.
Yeah, there weren't many bowl games. You're right.
Yeah. And Andy's in California today, but next week he'll be back in Morgantown. The university is going to honor the 75 bowl team, as well as others who played under Bobby Bowden. And we've talked about it, that Jen Antoniuk has released through WVU Press his book on Bobby Bowden. And Andy had John on the show, and he talked about his book. And as I told you, I had a chance to write a review for it. And so, folks, if you show up next week, Friday, Saturday at Kegler's, you may run into Andy Peters and a whole bunch of other Mountaineers from back in that era. Actually, not just the 75 team, but going back to all the way back to 1966, when Bobby Bowden came from Florida State. People don't realize he came from Florida State and then went back to Florida State. He was an assistant coach first. And so next Saturday's game against TCU, at kickoff at 6 on Saturday, there are going to be celebrations with respect to the Bowden period at West Virginia. But we've got a game coming up in about an hour or so. Greg and Andy, what are your thoughts about this UCF game?
Andy, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. Both teams have a coach that played at their universities and coached at their universities, and they're both back there now. With Scott Frost and Rich Rodriguez. Both teams haven't won a conference game yet, so we're kind of, in some cases, mirror images of ourselves. I think we might have a little bit of an advantage coming off the bye. They've played 5 straight games. I think what could be a factor is that their strength of schedule has been pretty poor compared to ours. I think we have, they're 110 and we're 14th strength of schedule. So they've run up a lot of statistics against some weaker teams in their non-conference play. And I think Cincinnati kind of took it to them a little bit last week. I think there was a statistic that nobody has scored against UCF in the first quarter. And then last week, Cincinnati scored 2 touchdowns in the first quarter against them. I kind of like the matchup for us. Their offensive line is struggling. Our offensive line is struggling a little bit as well. Their running game isn't that great outside of their quarterback. Their quarterback is the guy they really depend on. You got to worry about that a little bit too. I went to the BYU game, and boy, that quarterback from BYU, he was a handful. That guy, just as a side note, that BYU game was one of the best college football experiences I've ever been to. If anybody ever gets a chance to go to Provo for a game, it's tremendous, especially what they do between the third and fourth quarter. It's like a Super Bowl halftime show. So, it's a great opportunity for us to get our first conference win. We've had a difficult time losing Nico and losing Jaheim and losing Jaden Bray and Ty Edwards. I mean, we're counting on those guys this year, right? And not to have them is kind of difficult. But at the same time, it provides opportunity. I was hugely impressed by Scotty Fox when he came in the BYU game, and in 3 plays, he took us down the field for a touchdown, and they made it look effortless. And, they still had a lot of starters in at that point in time because, it was a two-score game. It wasn't a complete blowout, right? If they don't get that pick six and that long touchdown before the half, that's a nip and tuck game to the end. So I kind of like our chances today. They tend to have these long drives and they fizzle out, right? They have penalties or have tackles for a loss. So I think having the explosive plays, whoever has the most explosive plays, either on our side or their side, is probably going to win today.
Good synopsis. I agree with a lot what Andy said there. Watching UCF, like he said, their offensive line struggled a little bit. The competition level for them hasn't been great, which, I think we match up pretty well with them. Their speed worries you a little bit, and the mobility of their quarterback worries you a little bit. But, we've seen glimpses, with our defense, for example, where we played extremely well defensively. Our offense seemed to get a spark last game against BYU. I thought the offense looked fairly decent, and I think we showed some improvement. It's just so hard to gauge our team because you don't know, what's going to show up. Is it going to be the team that played Pitt, or is it going to be the team that played Utah? You just don't know. And, I think that's all part of being young and trying to grow together and figure the system out and all those things. I think having this week off is going to help tremendously. Frank, and Andy both, I'm a little worried, not that Scotty Fox is the starter. I think, he's shown that he can play, obviously. But, I thought Wilson's had a pretty good game, against BYU and showed some flashes. And I worry that maybe he might have gotten banged up a little bit, Maybe that's not the case. I know he didn't throw the ball real well. He settled down some in the second half and played a lot better, but that was a little bit worrisome that he would switch. That's kind of surprising to me, unless something else is going on. We say that from the living room. They're out there at practice with him every day, so they know, they know what's best. They're not going to put somebody. It's what I used to tell people when I coached. I'm not going to put people out there that gives us less of a chance to win just because their parents are upset. It don't work like that. So I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, I think you're right. We've got to. I think our offensive line has got to keep improving. We got to give our quarterback some time. I think running the fast-paced offense is designed to kind of compensate for your lack of offensive line blocking, but we've got to give him time to throw the ball. We got to run the ball a little bit. Our defense has got to contain that guy, the quarterback, and I think that'll be a key and get a little bit of pressure on him, make him throw the ball. And again, like I said, I'm not totally impressed with UCF. I think we match up well with them, and I think we got a pretty good shot. I feel pretty good, especially after it seems like even though we lost to BYU, it seemed like we got a little momentum there because we played better. And it was a fun game to watch. And Andy mentioned the pick six. Had that not occurred, the long touchdown before half. But, you also think about the fact that we, Edwards dropped a pass at the goal line that was intercepted after he dropped it, and he should have caught it and scored. We also got the ball down to the 6-inch line and couldn't poke it in. I said, you think about those things, and if any of those things go our way, that could be been a total different ball game. So you kind of feel like we gained a little bit of momentum there against BYU. So you feel pretty good going into this one. And Frank, I really think that if we show up and we play, that we have a good chance to win the game.
Well, I agree with both analyses. I think it's spot on. And one of the points you made, Andy, in terms of they have long drives, but self-inflicted wounds keeps them. In fact, they have, they've not been successful. We saw Kansas and BYU very effective on third downs. UCF is just the opposite. About 30% of the time, they're successful. and their defense is way ahead of their offense. And the big question is who they're going to play at quarterback. I really thought Fancher would be the guy they would go to, but they've had injuries at quarterback, and so it could well be that Jackson will go today. But one of the things about UCF, just like WVU, you're seeing a lot of new faces, people who weren't players who weren't there before. Jackson came from Indiana University. Fancher came from Marshall, and then Florida Atlantic. Their real problem is, like us, the offensive line has not been their friend. They've been moved around a lot on the offensive line. And also, like us, their wide receivers have not been they don't really have a go-to guy at wideout. They have a number of guys who've caught passes, but the guy that we've got to watch is Lewis Carter on defense. He's making all-America noises with what he's sort of a one-man wrecking crew. So you don't want to hear his name a lot because we've been hearing his name a lot if you've watched UCF. And they have a hell of a field goal kicker if they get close. This guy is money inside the 40, 45-yard line. And I think, I have it, or I think he's 11 of 13 altogether. I thought I had it here. In fact, what I'll do is let me put up this graphic where I know I have the number included. We could get it to come up. There we go. Yeah, there it is right there. So he's 10 of 11. Noah Rulos is 10 of 11. I mentioned Carter. And the other thing that I mentioned, guys, is his defense not only is carrying the way. The red is areas of concern for UCF, and the green obviously is areas they're doing well. They're 17th in the country in terms of opponents scoring against them at under 18, and they're 14th nationally in terms of quarterback yardage, the opponent quarterback. So that's the other thing. No matter who we have in, can we break that pattern, and can our quarterback get yards against UCF? Others have not been able to do that, including Cincinnati's quarterback, who's a pretty good quarterback. So I'm concerned about the place kicking. I'm concerned about being able to stop them or to have them stop themselves on these drives. And I was going to say we have to win this game. Of course, we have to win it. But TCU coming up next. All of us are playing the same game quietly, is looking at the schedule and saying which games are we gonna win here. And when you think about it, as you look at the schedule, where the win's going to come from. Let me throw it up here so we can see it.
Hey Frank, while you're
if you look at it, we got the bye week, then UCF. Yeah.
You mentioned
Yep.
You mentioned the kicker. I want to get this in before we get away from that. You mentioned the kicker for UCF and how effective he was. I know how to stop that because I listened to an interview one time. They interviewed a coach, and he had a field goal kicker. It was really good. And the news reporter said, "Coach, we understand you got a field goal kicker who is automatic from 70 yards and in." And he said, "Yeah, that's right." He said he can boom it through at 70 yards. And he said, "Well, you really think that's going to be a good weapon for you?" And he said, "Only if we can get close enough." So
that's true. So the UCF is clearly a winnable game, even though we're 7-point underdogs. And you got TCU, which is having a little rougher season than many people expected. Houston's a lot better. Colorado, sometimes they win games they expect they're not favored, and vice versa. Arizona State is still strong. So this is an important game. We got to have some good things to talk about. And I'll close with this. I agree with Greg. Andy may feel the same way. That BYU game was a good game, given the way we finished it out. With basically after they got ahead 14-0, we matched them point for point. A good game to have before a bye week.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting about UCF's defense is that they're really great against the pass, but they're weaker against the run, right? Yeah. So we know Rich likes to run the ball. And boy, it would have been great to have Ty Edwards today, but if Scotty and Hubbard and others can run the ball and we can possess the ball, keep it away from them, that'd be awesome, right? I'd love to see that. That'd probably mean that we're probably going to win, right? If we can control the ball and keep it away from them.
Yep, Frank, you talk about the time of possession all the time, and I agree with Andy. I think it's
that's what we're going to have to do. No question about that,
yeah.
Right, Greg?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it's vital today. We've got to sustain some drives, and the drives don't necessarily you can't expect to score every one, but field position and that sort of thing. We've had a lot of problems this year. It seems like with we run the hurry up, and sometimes we're 3 and out pretty quick, and that's tough on the defense when you do that. And I just think it's imperative that we hold on to the ball and not turn it over, and get first downs, and string a few drives together, give the defense rest, that sort of thing, keep their offense off the field. It's paramount. I think it's so important for us to do that, and we haven't been able to do that a lot this year. We did it against Pitt, and I think the time of possession was fairly equal, but we were able to keep the field flipped. And that's important. It's a lot easier to go, on a 50-yard drive, obviously, than it is on an 80-yard drive. And, we've had a trouble, getting those first downs, keeping those drives going. We may get one, and then, like Andy said, we do the same thing. We tend to fizzle out, and, we'll get a first down, and then we'll get a penalty, or we get a tackle for a loss, and then we're behind the chains, and we can't seem to overcome that. And, not having your receivers, that really, that hurts. Not having, your key running back hurts. But, we've been dealing with that all year. It's been an injury-plagued season, which is not, I don't know that would have a big effect on what our record is right now. But I think we've been a lot more competitive in some of these games had we had a full cast of characters. And that's something you got to deal with. And, it's like I said, on the bright side, you're getting an opportunity to see people play, and they get a chance to play that may have not gotten that chance otherwise. And, if you think back to Rich's first tenure at WVU, because of an injury, Pat White and Steve Slayton got to play, and you saw what happened there. So, you never know what can come of that. So sometimes that's a blessing in disguise that these guys are getting time, and Scotty Fox might be that one. You just don't know. But yeah, we got to stay on the field. We got to keep some drives going, keep their offense off the field. And, I think really our offensive line, and we say this all the time, that's the key. Well, I don't think at this point, after watching our offensive line through the season, I don't think we're going to come out and blow anybody off the ball. I think everybody knows that. So the scheme has to be so that, we're keeping the defense off balance, and that helps our run game. And, I think him using the quarterback, Scotty Fox can run, obviously. But, the worrisome thing about that, too, is you got to worry about injuries again with that running quarterback out there. And you hope that he knows he's got to get down. He can't be taking hits.
Yeah.
And, but that does add an element in there that, the defense has to prepare for, and it gives us another running back, essentially. And of course, Scotty Fox can throw the football too. I think we've seen that. I mean, he's got a nice arm, and that pass in the BYU game was beautifully thrown ball. So, the offensive line, of course, is important. They've got to do better than what they've done. But I don't think we can expect them to come out and just totally dominate a game. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we'd like to see it, but it ain't going to happen. But they've got to show some improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I would really love to see between now and the end of the season are some breakout guys, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Scotty Fox or Wilkins or, whatever position, offense and defense is, because, Rich needs to figure out who he can win with next season. Right? We need to come out of this year with guys we can count on that can form a good foundation for next year, and then add to it through the portal and through recruiting. So we can obviously compete at a higher level next season. because it's a tough league, right? It's every game's rough, and I think it's going to happen. I feel pretty certain that we're going to be surprised with some guys. It's like Ty Edwards kind of came out of nowhere, right? And not instrumental in that pit win, which, man, that pit win really looks great now, doesn't it? With beating Florida State, and how they've kind of stepped it up. That should give our team some confidence that they can play that well against that type of quality opponent, that we can do it. And sometimes teams have a number against other teams, and we've done well against UCF. We've won at their place. We beat them at our place, and I know it's under different regimes, but sometimes it doesn't matter. It's kind of like even in pro sports. The Steelers, they have a difficult time winning on Thursday evenings against divisional opponents. They're like 0-7, right? And that trend keeps on continuing. And here, WVU's two times we played UCF, we beat them, and maybe we have their number. Maybe we're that school that they have a rough time winning against.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we beat him there 2 years ago, and there's an advantage at UCF that we have at no other school in the Big 12, and that is the ease of travel. So expect there to be a lot of Mountaineers in the stands. We talked with Charlie Bauman the other night, who was a place kicker on the national when we played for the national title in '89, and he manages a hotel and restaurant there. They had a big deal last night. He thinks there'll be a lot of Mountaineers there, and that's something, because with the entrance of the Big 12, we lost our advantage in terms of being able to play, frequently places like Virginia Tech and Maryland, and Pitt and Penn State and Syracuse. So that's really important. One of the things we do every week, Andy, is pick a score, and Mickey and Greg and I have picked our scores. We'll tell you what we picked after you give us your score, and then we'll see who wins. And the winner gets a yet to be determined huge prize.
Okay.
Yeah. And Andy, we also I like to do this little sidelight. Mickey always tries to Bob Barker us. That's why we're not telling you what the score is. What we pick before you pick, because Mickey likes to bet $1. He goes 2 to 1's his score.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to go with 21-17 Mountaineers.
Well,
how about that? Well, I said 24-16. Mickey said 24-20, and Greg said 27-21. So we're all in the ballpark, thinking that we're going to be able to score against this team and then control them enough to come away with the win. And Mickey beat the heck out of us last year. I think he won all but 2 games, was it? I think 2 weeks. Yeah. But we're tied going in now, or we're 2-2-2, and so it'll be interesting. But yeah, if this is one of the games that we can win, there's absolutely no question about that. And the points you made, I did not know, Andy, and that is until last week they had not given up a touchdown in the first quarter. And that's going to be a key to the game. Can we do something? And obviously, I'm sure the scheming that Greg talked about, schemes when we get the ball first, to be able to score and get ahead on the road is always important. But I think for this team, just double that.
Yeah, and I really go back to that strength of schedule. Boy, I think, man, we played in a really tough environment at BYU, and I was really proud of those guys. And that could have been a turning point for us. I think we did come out of that game with some momentum, even though we lost it. I think some guys got their legs underneath them, and it gave them some confidence that they could compete so well against. I think they were 16th in the country going into that game, right? A very quality opponent. I mean, the BYU fans were probably the most polite fans I ever met in my life, but they were extremely loud and enthusiastic, and it was hard to hear. And I was proud of our guys, the way they performed on both sides of the ball, right? I know we had some breakdowns, right, here and there, but we had some outstanding plays too. that pitch out down by their goal line that we deflected and went in for a score, or that following turnover. That was a great play. That's like every defensive end's dream is to knock down a pitch like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer to intercept it and walk into the end zone, but I'll take what he did. So looking forward to it. And man, we really need to get on the winning track. The coaches and the players are working so hard. I went through a season like this in '74. It's not easy. I mean, you put so much effort in, and you still have all those bumps and bruises, but you're not getting the fulfillment of the win. But you got to keep your head up, and you got to keep pushing, and you got to keep fighting for your state and your university and your teammates. And I think Rich will keep everybody together, and I think everybody will really pull through. And I'm looking for some good things to happen between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, Frank.
You talked about the fans at BYU.
We talked last week about
verified by Tom Sikowski, who knows the person who told me this story. But we've had Tom on the program before. I didn't ask him this, and that is, you talked about the BYU fans, but what's it like when a Mountaineer goes to Provo to school? So this friend of mine went to school at West Virginia, lived actually out by Lakeview during the years that he was there. Then he decided for some reason or another to go to BYU as a student after West Virginia to do graduate work. And the story he tells is that he did something at BYU that prompted one of the administrators to run after him on campus because he was so mad at him. And I just can't imagine an administrator at BYU doing that. So I think the interpreter has to be Tom Sikowski. Did this really happen?
Yeah. Walking out of the stadium, I met our president of the university's brother-in-law, Michael Benson's brother-in-law, just by happenstance. He said, "What was your experience like?" Because I had WVU gear on. I said, "This was a fantastic experience." And he goes, "Well, Michael Benson's my brother-in-law." And he goes, "What do you think of him?" And I said, "Well, everything sounds really positive so far." He goes, "Let me tell you a few things about him." And he brought up a picture of him surfing, right, in Hawaii or somewhere. He sings Italian opera. He does Ironman triathlons. He said when you get to know him, he's one of the most unique individuals that you'll ever meet in your life. I said, "Wow, that's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to his leadership." And already in a short time he's been there, there's been some really positive things that have happened. So, even though we're having a down season, I think there's some good signs that the future is bright for WVU.
You hear about that. I don't want to get defensive, Andy, but after this show, Greg and I are going to a high jump contest, and the question is, how many high jump IPAs can you drink in 30 minutes? And I think if Greg doesn't win, I think I've got a pretty good shot.
There you go.
Yeah. My 2-inch vertical. When you said that, I'm like, wait a minute. He was talking about the BYU, the fans, and all that. I think I told this not long ago. My friend I used to work with up in Morgantown, his wife worked for something to do with the Alumni Association and the game day events and that sort of thing. And she, they always provided meals and different events for the families of the players from the opposing teams. And she was just talking in general about the different people that came. And she mentioned the BYU. She said the BYU fans, the families, were the absolute nicest, friendliest, most fun people that they dealt with the whole season. And that's when they come to WVU and played.
Great.
So, yeah, hats off to them. And then, we've seen the passing out the ice cream and that sort of thing. And Frank, the thing that's always struck me was you get up early and walk across campus and everybody says good morning to you. And I didn't catch on to that until later in the day. But
yeah, I'll tell you one thing about going to a BYU game. You better bring your own alcohol to tailgate in the parking lot.
That's right.
You're not going to get anything even
Yeah,
close to the
yeah,
stadium.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, Frank, you didn't hear that, did you? Good
What?
Mormon. I said good Mormon.
Oh, I
Good
see.
Mormon.
Oh, I didn't get
I got your
that.
response.
I got
I
it now,
didn't
Like,
too. I
get
missed it
that.
the first time.
No.
Yeah.
Excellent.
man,
Good Mormon.
man, I've been working on that material for a week, and
Yeah.
I bombed.
No, 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 no. Andy, you were talking about a tough league, and last year Arizona State just really pulled in Indiana. Nobody expected Arizona State to do much last year. In fact, in some preseason polls, they were last. Heck, they find themselves in the college football playoff. Obviously, before that, they win the Big 12 and should have beaten Texas. This year, that team's got to be Cincinnati. You mentioned last week, Cincinnati and UCF, and we had just played Kansas. Then we watched Cincinnati go into Kansas and beat them late after the Jayhawks had taken a lead. This Cincinnati team has all the makings of a 2025 version of the 2024 Arizona State team.
Yeah, Sorsby is, I think, a really probably underrated
Excellent.
quarterback, right? He's a tough kid, man. That game we had with him last year, he was very impressive, and we're lucky to get out of there with a win. He's good. I agree. It's I like the Big 12 a lot, and I've got we get to know these different schools and programs, and Cincinnati obviously is new to the league. I think they're going to have a bright future. They're in a good recruiting area. And they're great football players within 3 or 4 hours around there, and within their state as well. And they create some excitement around that program. I think they're going to be tough to deal with.
What a sneaky fast program too, because you think about it, it's just not a one-off. Luke Fickell brought him to the college football playoffs, and before that, Brian Kelly. And then before that, Mark D'Antonio. So when you think about Cincinnati, I think the sort of the knee-jerk reaction is, well, they're okay, but when you look at the progress over the last 20, 25 years, they've had outstanding coaches and some success. By the way, Cincinnati is a 24-point favorite today over Oklahoma State. Here's another one talking about BYU. What are your thoughts on this, guys? Start with Greg. Utah against BYU at BYU tonight. That's going to be a must-watch game on Fox. Utah is a 4-point favorite at Provo, and BYU is undefeated. Does that make sense, guys?
It doesn't make sense to me. I think it's it's kind of like you mentioned with Cincinnati. I feel like sometimes people say, well, it's BYU, and really they don't watch them, and really see how good they are. Playing at BYU, and I'll tell you what. That quarterback, I know he's a freshman, but he's good. And, their defense is pretty solid. I think it'll be a fun game to watch. I'm surprised that Utah is a favorite, at least that big of a favorite. I thought maybe 1 or 2 points, possibly one way or the other. But, I'm surprised that they're that big of a favorite. And I think I'd put my money on BYU with the points there for sure. But, I just think that people don't, you look at the Big 12 as a whole too, and you're talking about Cincinnati, and then, the things that happened last year, people, I think, look at the Big 12 and think, well, they're okay. And even when they were talking about this, the playoff platform where they were going to give some conferences more teams than other conferences. Of course, the Big 12 was going to get less teams in. And they're saying, well, they may not have that many teams that are good enough to be in the playoff. Well, you know what? If you look, and I've said this for years, you look at these other conferences, the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, you've got some good teams in there, but then you go down the line, and they're not good teams, and they're not any better than anybody else. And you look at the Big 12, and you've got, you may not have a powerhouse in, say, an Ohio State in there, but you've got very good teams at the top, and as you go down, it doesn't fall off a great deal. Now you do have some teams struggling like us at the bottom, Colorado, but for the most part, those teams are all good. And, that conference top to bottom to me is one of maybe the best one in the country. And yeah, you look at the SEC and you see the big names. That don't mean they're that good. You look at the Big Ten and Penn State, for example, with their record. I mean, those teams, a lot of it's name recognition and name history, that they're considered such great teams. And you look at this Big 12 and it's pretty solid. When you go through the first 8 or 10, it's pretty solid conference.
Yeah. Yeah, I was fortunate at the BYU game to sit next to a colleague from the construction industry that went to BYU, and he knew the team really well. And it's amazing that their quarterback and his brother, Bear and Tiger Brockmeyer, I think is his last name, they both had transferred from Stanford late. They weren't there at spring practice last year. They only had fall practice. And to be a freshman like that, for Bear, that kid, man, he's got my attention. And the number that he chose to be a quarterback, right? He took a fullback's number because he wants to play quarterback like a fullback. He's made that comment. And you watch him, and I see a little bit of Scotty Fox having that type of mentality, very fiery like that. I like these fiery young quarterbacks that your team just wants to follow them, and I hope Scotty has that kind of game today that kind of solidifies him to be the guy, and maybe he'll be our version of Bear in the future. But I thought that was interesting, and the other was, boy, they hate Utah. Oh my goodness! You think we hate Pitt? Oh my God! Utah, BYU, that's going to be such a good game to watch.
Utah State is the one advantage they have. They hate both BYU and Utah. So, another game that's going to happen today, actually, it's the point of no return for Arizona State. They're playing the 4:00 game on Fox, Arizona State against Texas Tech. Texas Tech has thrown so much money at athletics. It's just nothing short of amazing, not just in football, but beyond that. They're playing in Arizona, but Texas Tech, undefeated at 6-0, is a 7-point favorite. Arizona State's 4-2, and so they can't lose this game and still be a factor. And Texas Tech's a top 10 team. What do you guys think about that game, Texas Tech versus Arizona State?
I tell you what, Texas Tech is a good football team, but it's awful hard to go undefeated, and somewhere along the line, you hit that bump in the road. We saw Miami last night lose to Louisville, so it happens. And Arizona State, they're back against the wall. They know what you just said, Frank, and that is, if they lose this one, they're probably out of the playoff picture and out of the chance to contend for the title in the Big 12. And it puts Texas Tech totally in the driver's seat at that point, but I think they already are in there. But Texas Tech's an awful good football team, and I don't know. I don't know if Arizona State can beat them, but anything's possible. But again, Texas Tech's very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's ironic that the Texas Tech president was commenting so much about the state of college football today, and talking about the need for it to change, and how he doesn't like the financial system, but yet he goes ahead and secures all that funding to be the most financially supported program in the Big 12. You talk about talking out of the both sides of your mouth, right? I guess he's saying, as long as the rules are what they are, we're going to go ahead and take advantage of them, but we don't like the rules. But okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think they're the class of the league right now. I think they're going to win.
Yeah. Well, with Nebraska found out very quickly that when Texas and Oklahoma came into the Big 12, they were the odd person out, and so that's they got a windfall by going to the Big 10. But now with Oklahoma and Texas gone to the SEC, the question is who's going to be the kingpin in the Big 12, and there's no question that money talks, and Texas Tech has the money, and it's not just. This is common knowledge, but talk about Stanford, Andy. They recruited a softball player from Stanford, outstanding. And of course, in softball, you can pitch pitch every day. And so they gave her $1 million to come. They've given her $1 million to stay in Nil. And she brought the Cowboys women's softball team all the way to the national championship final against Texas. Texas won, but they're making using a basketball reference, a full court press to be the top school in Texas. And I don't mean to be negative, but it's not because of their academic standing. I'll tell you that. So they're going to do it athletically. That's how they're going to make their reputation, is by athletics. Texas has a chock full of really outstanding academic schools, and that's how they're going to do it. And I think that's probably what is motivating the board and the president.
Yeah, but one thing they can't get away from is that they're still in Lubbock, Texas.
That's
hard to overcome. Big difference between Lubbock and Austin, that's for sure.
It's like Scotch. It's an acquired taste.
Okay.
Yeah, no question about that. So, well, I see we're getting. Go ahead.
I mean, you can. If people look at this is what it's coming to, and until some regulations are put in place, some rules, this is the way it's going to be, and we better get used to it. And the bad part for places like WVU is we don't have that financial backing that the Texas, the oil people and those folks have, and it makes it tougher for schools like that. So in essence, if you look down the road, we could become basically a farm system where we're developing players, and then they're getting big money, getting Texas oil money to go to Texas Tech, and I think eventually some cooler heads are going to prevail, and there are going to be some parameters put on some of this, just to prevent that from happening. Because if it just continues the way it's going, if it continues like this, that's the way it's going to be. I mean, whoever puts the most money in is going to have the best team, and
well, and you're living in California now, Andy. I don't know to what extent it's gotten press out there, but we do know, number one, that the Big Ten now will have an infusion of resources, if everything goes the way they hope, of private equity funding coming into the Big Ten, which will mean a windfall for every single Big Ten team, even though it will not be distributed equally. But also one of the investors is the University of California retirement system. So all the people who work for the University of California, I guess their board has already voted, I may be wrong, but to invest a big chunk of their resources in Big Ten football. Has that gotten much press out in California?
No, that's the first I've heard of it. So I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, it might be useful for those watching too, just to Google University of California retirement system, Big Ten, private equity, because this money is going to come in all at once in a chunk to the league, and then the league's going to distribute that, which essentially means that the Big Ten will become corporatized, not with stakeholders only, but with shareholders. And then the profit that the Big Ten makes will be distributed, part of it will be distributed back to these investors. And so what you've done is you've corporatized. And of course, one of the things that Greg and I have talked a lot about is it's another strategy of this sumo wrestling match between the Big Ten and the SEC, which one is going to have more control over college football and the future of college football. And that's going to be done through money. I mean, there's absolutely no question. So it's going to happen. I really think unless there's a lawsuit or unless some folks back out, the Big Ten is going to be the first major conference with external investors. And if the Big Ten does it, they're going to be followers.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So will Cal be invited to the Big Ten?
Well, that's
In
it.
the ACC, right?
I know. Isn't that interesting? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's right. Cal Berkeley is in the ACC. Was not invited. I mean,
Yeah.
it was not a matter of going to the ACC. It was a matter of not being invited to the Big Ten. Same with Stanford. Which is really surprising because those are two of the best universities in the country, and neither one was invited to the Big Ten. And so they hung around for a while, and then the ACC came calling, and they left.
You know, if I'm Ren Baker, every time one of these Powerballs gets up to about $1 billion, he's got to be on his knees praying that somebody from West Virginia wins that thing.
That's right.
Yeah, sad. That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've based my retirement and everything on that for the last 35 years, and I'm still not there. But yeah, this is to me that's kind of scary when you think about that, because if that happens, and you have all this money coming in, then suddenly the NCAA or whoever's in charge says, "Now wait a minute, we can't do this. We got to do it this way." Then they're going to be in court. There's going to be litigation. We're a corporation. We can do what we want. It's to me, it just creates so many more issues that's going to crop up in the future. And as long as we wait and the SEC and the Big Ten do what they're going to do, I think it's going to get more convoluted and it's going to get more twisted to where fixing it is going to be so much more difficult. And
Yeah.
I just think things like that are a little bit scary for us fans.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. Well, Greg, I'm looking at the clock, and we're getting close to the bottom of the hour, so I think you got to take us home here.
Yep. Well, it's been a ton of fun, Andy, having you on. We appreciate you more than you know. It's been a lot of fun talking to you and getting your insights. Very very productive, and we appreciate you taking some time to spend with us here on the pregame show. More than you know. We thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's fun.
No, absolutely. Anytime. And again, Frank, I think we've all picked WVU to win today, so we got to get us a victory. And we want to remind everybody we'll be on with the post-game show. That'll follow about 30 minutes after the game concludes. And we'll go back and give our takes on what happened. And we encourage you to feel free to comment. I think we'll have Steve Newberry. Is that correct? Yes. Steve Newberry will be on.
There we go.
Yep. And if any of you, we've had Steve Newberry. I've had him on my show when I was doing a show. We've had him on here. Great guy. He'll be entertaining, I'm sure. So you want to make sure you tune in for that. And that's about 30 minutes after the game concludes today. Hopefully we're in a good mood talking about a victory. That's the plan anyway. And we look forward to that. So we thank everybody for tuning in and watching. We look forward to talking to you here in a few hours after we get this Mountaineer win. So let's go Mountaineers, and we will talk to you post-game. Good day, everybody.
Thank you.